There are people that are going to judge, but usually I find, well, that's their own baggage. There's a reason for that. I just think as decent humans, we generally have positive intent. Welcome to The Fearless Foodie, the podcast that gets honest about what it really takes to thrive in food and retail. I'm Amy Wilkinson, coach, speaker and trusted partner to food industry teams with lived experience of the pace, pressure and politics that come with the job. Fearless Foodies cut through the fluff and get straight to what actually helps. And that's exactly what we're here to do. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Fearless Foodie podcast. Today I am joined by a co-host, the lovely Bethan Grills from Food Manufacturer. Hi Bethan.
Hi Amy. Oh, I'm so glad the video's not on. You've got
your video. Have you switched your video off then?
No.
I can still see you.
No, I haven't. I forgot we were recording the video and I've turned up in full hot weather glasses mode.
Yeah, and we're all fully judging you for it as well. So for those of you that don't know Beth, there is an episode of the Over Food's Sake podcast, which I will put in the show notes, so you can find out all about Beth and the history of how she became editor of Food Manufacturer. But today she's here not just to be interviewed, but to talk and co-host with me. And we have got a couple of episodes with Beth this series, and this one we're really going to be exploring about how in leadership, well, just at work, like, let's not make it all fancy all the time, like, but how sometimes we get a little bit scared about asking questions and thinking that we need to know all the answers, and how it's okay to do that, and why credibility doesn't necessarily come from knowing everything. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think this is really relevant to the people listening, because if I think about all the people that I work with in my coaching practice and stuff like that, there's so many people in so many roles where you have to interact with other departments and more senior people, and you have no flipping clue you feel like you've got no flipping clue about what you're talking about. And, you know, one of the big conversations we have is ask more questions. So why did you want to do this episode, Beth?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on as a co-host, Amy. This is so exciting.
And it's a bit weird as well, because I'm still going to end up interviewing you, right? But then you're a journalist, so you might interview me too. So we'll just see how it goes, right?
I could flip it totally around. Yeah, I wanted to bring this topic to everyone's attention because I think it is it's a skill of journalists. We have to be able to ask questions. And in B2B journalism in particular, if you've not come from a background of, you know, whether it's food or I'm just going to name titles, I've been on electronics, plumbing and heating. I've never been a plumber or a heating engineer, would you believe? You've got to be able to ask questions in order to get good content. And I think there is a fear from a lot of people. They avoid asking questions because there's this fear that they will appear incompetent. And I think that stems from a concern about you're going to be judged. You know, you're going to look like you don't have credibility if you say, what does that mean? You know, what does that acronym stand for? But the food sector's like acronym bingo, isn't it?
Oh my God, yeah.
Remember when I first came in, I mean, I'm getting better at knowing all the acronyms, but, you know, we don't know everything and that's okay. And I think there's a lot that you can gain in terms of your own development, but also the development of your team by not being afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I guess, so how long have you, because before Food Manufacturer, you were on another food title, weren't you? It was food related, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, like, you know, when you come in and you've got zero experience and then you're with people that have got 30, 40 years experience, how do you cope with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've been in journalism well over 10 years now. And when I went into the food sector, and I think a lot of people have this, we do this regular column on Food Manufacturer called All in a Day's Work. And it always surprises me. It says, how did you get into the food sector? And people are like, well, by accident. You know? And by that, I don't mean one day I woke up and I was just at a computer editing a manufacturer. You know, I worked very hard to get here. But I was previously the editor of New Food, which is a scientific journal, and I am not a scientist. My
Yeah.
degree is very much in content, and I've got an NCTJ, but it is daunting. But I always think that people don't judge you. They're actually very open, generally, to sharing insight. People quite like to teach other people.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
normally judge. So, as a journalist, you're a very good listener and you have to just ask. Sometimes asking those simple questions can get you really interesting stories. And it's the same in terms of leadership. You aren't going to know everything about your front line. The people that are doing that job day in, day out, you can't possibly store all of that information. I mean, maybe some people can, but I certainly can't. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
be able to ask those people. That's the power of delegation, right?
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
You can't be an expert in everything. And it's only by asking sometimes these simple questions like, oh, so why do you do that? That you can sometimes actually have really good ideas that can actually spark innovation.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely something in this whole being okay with being curious and stuff like that, because I think when I see teams that I work with where it's not okay to ask questions and people feel the need to kind of look like they know all the answers or bullshit, frankly, that's when you don't get the innovation, and that's where you get all the blockers, because it doesn't feel safe. If it doesn't feel safe to ask questions, then you're not creating that curiosity, you're not exploring different ways of doing things, so you do things the way you've always done them. So I think like it's really transferable into like a innovation or manufacturing environment, thinking about actually how do we ever do anything differently if we're not willing to ask questions. But what do you think? I'm totally interviewing you, aren't I? I can't help it. But it's just interesting to get your view. Like, have there been times in your career where you've felt like, I don't want to ask the question? Or like, I just think there's something about being in a room full of people that have got a lot of experience that can make, I don't know if you or you've seen it in members of your team or anything like that, where actually you have held back from asking the questions.
Oh, it's incredibly daunting, I think, for anyone. And I think there's probably this idea that we think leaders know everything. We think
Yeah.
people in a position of authority have this amazing font of knowledge. And of course, many of them do. But as I said, not everyone knows everything. And standing up in front of peers or in front of people that, have 40 years of industry experience within the food
Mm.
sector. Absolutely, you'd be silly not to feel nervous about it. But as I said, there's things that I will come across because of the nature of my jobs and because I have that curiosity to ask questions. But also as a journalist, as I said, we're really good listeners. So it's not really about me standing up there and going, look at all of the knowledge that I have.
Yeah.
Is actually me standing up there and going, you tell me what you know.
Yeah.
And then repeating it in a way that makes sense to everyone.
She's just given away all the secrets of journalists.
Oh, no.
But I mean, I love it when you're saying this, because that is basically what coaching is as well. Like, it's very similar. It's about having curiosity and then actually framing it back to a person. But that in itself can, like, even just paraphrasing back to somebody what you've said can help your understanding, because they might go, oh no, that isn't what I meant, this is what I meant. Or it sparks another idea, and actually hearing it from another person makes them think differently. So actually that curiosity makes a massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I always do the echoing back. So to clarify, or to sum up your key takeaways, and it's always funny when you're doing something like an interview and they're like, not quite. You're like, oh, okay. Tell me then. Yeah, because the food sector is so complicated. There's so many different branches to it. That's why we've got all the different departments. That's why we have, challenges at the moment, because departments are siloed, because,
Yeah.
there's a lot of encased wisdom within those different departments that aren't collaborating. And you need to
Yeah.
be able to go and ask questions, as a head of policy to your MPD team, and vice versa. Otherwise, you're going to come up against some really, really big obstacles. But I think one of the reasons why we don't like asking questions. And you asked me before whether or not I've, felt afraid. Of course, I think we all have. I think
Yeah.
there's always been a case, particularly in a big group environment, where it is really scary to say, what does that mean? Because as I said, you worry that other people are going to think badly of you for asking that question. But probably most of the time, and I have to tell myself this, I'm certainly, it is a practice. It is really, really difficult to do. It sounds like a really simple thing, but it's not. But most of the time, you'll ask a question and someone will go, I'm certain will go, oh, thank goodness you asked that.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I didn't know what. And it's happened to me before.
Yeah. So many times people are so grateful that you've asked the stupid question, and that just proves that it's not stupid.
Yeah.
Because I think you're absolutely right. Like in what you're saying, there's so many acronyms. Even I'm thinking about like you move from one business to another and they call things different things. Like I'm just thinking of one, a lot of businesses that are Tesco facing, they use the term natural work team. So that's like your little, usually at Tesco's, for instance, it would be your buyer, your developer and your technologist. So a lot of manufacturers call it that as well. But then you'll go to another one and they'll call it the triangle or something like that, and you're like, sorry, are we all walking around pinging triangles? Like, what are we talking about here? And definitely in that whole not being afraid to ask a stupid question because everybody else in the room is thinking the same. I think there's some really powerful things about that are worth mentioning. So one is the way you frame questions. Like if you're somebody at the front of the room, one of the things that I really discourage people saying, I'm thinking about somebody in particular that's probably going to listen to this and go, all right, Amy, you've told me enough times. Don't say, does that make sense? Because everybody goes, oh, yeah. Because then you just feel like you're like questioning their authority or something by saying no. So everybody just automatically says yes. So finding other ways to check people's understanding. So saying things like, what questions have you got? I've talked about loads of stuff. What questions have you got about it? And people are more likely to be open to ask questions than the other way around. And I think there's something about that's really useful to know about the neuroscience and like the evolution of the human, of why it feels hard to ask questions. And particularly what triggered me thinking this when you were talking is in a large group, because as humans, we evolved as pack animals, and it was essential for us to be liked by the rest of the pack to survive, because if you didn't, you're out in your ear and you got eaten by a tiger or whatever. I don't know why I chose tiger.
That escalated quickly. Don't ask silly questions because you'll be eaten by a tiger.
Because you're going to get deaded. But the reality is, like, we don't think that on a conscious level, obviously, but that feeling of, I don't know about you, but that feeling of like embarrassment, I'll, flush up, I get blotchy on my chest, all of that, that's the fight or flight, same response, because it feels like if I look like a bit of a moron in front of this group of people, they're not going to like me, I'm going to be ousted from the group.
Yeah.
Reality is, not knowing what RSP means, for instance, is not going to get you, eaten by a tiger, but we have the same like physiological response, and then we tell ourselves stories in our head.
And I think that we often think that people are thinking negative things, and it's a lot around, attaching some sort of perception around how we predict people are going to react, when actually, and I've been listening to this amazing podcaster who talks about the let them theory. I don't know if you've come across it, Amy. And
we've done an episode on it, Beth.
Oh, look, there you go. Listen to that episode.
We will put a link in the show notes. So is it Mel Robbins that you've been listening to on about let them? You're like, I don't know.
I've forgotten her name.
She's American.
She is, yeah. That'll do. So one of the things that she says in the podcast is that you are constantly thinking negative things. You think positive things too. One of the things that she said was about her, children. She'll think, God, you're annoying, but she doesn't actually, she doesn't actually think that. I'm sure she does in some regards.
Sometimes, yeah.
I was trying to think of an example for you, Amy, and I don't have kids. All I have is cats.
Yeah, but they're quite annoying, right?
And then you feel, then I don't mean it. But, about your family, you can think, oh, my dad's winding me up about this, and why don't they just, get on with it, etc., etc. It doesn't mean that you actually feel negatively about that person. But also, we don't obsess about those thoughts. There's going to be maybe I'm going to really cause people anxiety, but there are going to be trillions of negative thoughts about me, about you, about other people. And you just can't dwell on it because you go absolutely bonkers. But also, most people won't think negatively about that. They're probably thinking about something else. I mean, it's like when you go to the gym and you think everyone's going to be looking at me because I can't, I don't know how to use some machine, I don't know how to lift it. No, they're not. They're all just thinking about themselves,
fighting for their lives.
Everyone else is very, we're quite self-absorbed as creatures. We think everything, people are thinking all about us, but actually, no.
Yeah. All right, time to give a quick shout out to the people making this podcast happen. These are the brilliant sponsors backing bold, fearless conversations like this one. Let's hear from them. Ensuring food safety and quality is crucial. That's why businesses trust Microsearch Laboratories, part of the IFP Labs group. UCAS accredited Microsearch offers microbiological, nutritional and allergen testing for food, drink and water, delivering fast results and expert support. With over 30 years of experience, trusted by leading manufacturers and retailers, and a commitment to sustainability, Microsearch is your partner in product safety. Visit micro-search.co.uk to learn more. The Fearless Leaders Programme is our flagship leadership development offer, designed for organisations who want to grow confident, influential leaders at every level. Whether you're supporting new senior leaders or investing in succession planning, we work as your L&D partner to deliver practical, tailored development that drives real impact. Find out more at fearlessfoodies.co.uk. And we're back. Let's dive right in. Everybody else is sitting there worrying about what other people are thinking of them. Nobody's actually worrying about those things. And the thing is, there are people that are going to judge. But usually I find, or I think, well, that's their own baggage. There's a reason for that. I just think generally as decent humans, we generally have positive intent. And I think if you can spend your life at work, I've got a really good phrase that one of my other coaches taught me, and I use it all the time now, which is people don't do things against you, they do them for themselves. So usually, probably 90% of people don't come to work and think, how many people can I annoy today? I think there is 10% of people that actually do. And they're...
On your way to work, driving in a car. How many people am I going to wind up today?
But that's the thing. They're probably the 10% that would judge you for asking questions. But I just think sod them, because actually 90% of people are like either thinking, phew, thank goodness you said that. Oh, actually, if she's willing to ask a question, that means I can ask a question. Because I think there's really something in that as well, in terms of from a leadership perspective. If you can demonstrate that you don't have all the answers and you sort of emulating, I can never think of the word. Like, what's the word I'm looking for? Come on, you're a journalist.
Encouraging other people?
Yeah, but more like practicing what you preach, really.
Yeah.
So actually, if you are willing to ask a stupid question or just say something like, can you clarify that, or whatever, it just gives everybody else permission in the room to do the same. And I think there's a real power in that. And actually, a lot of what we're talking about, and I think we're going to record another episode that's about leadership and all of that. But I think, and all of that.
Depends if she lets me back on, guys.
Let me know. Should I let her back?
Definitely. I'm definitely going to be putting some makeup on.
But it's about that, creating a place where it's okay to ask questions is about psychological safety. And psychological safety in the workplace is proven, and I always love it when I say these things, because I'm like, probably should have looked up some stats, but I haven't. It's proven to increase overall innovation and positive business outcomes because people are willing to take risks that they wouldn't but wouldn't otherwise take.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like admitting gaps in your own knowledge just is really powerful, and it allows people to feel safe. And it lets you learn as a leader about, and as I said, come up with certain ideas. But it also, if you are a leader, it empowers your team by
Yeah,
asking them questions. And sometimes even when you do know or think you know the answer, you shouldn't always give it either.
yeah,
It helps develop people when you say, well, how would you do that? Or how would you
yeah,
think about
yeah.
that? And I think that's a really powerful coaching tool. I'm treading on your toes, aren't I?
No, it's fine.
It's me.
No, no. If the world could be coached, I would be quite happy and use a coaching approach, because I think there's really something in that by creating an environment where questions are asked all the time, it makes people think more.
Yeah.
And I think about early in my career, being told how to do something is not as effective as being asked how you think you should do it and then working it out for yourself. And I think about the times like early on my career where I actually learned the most when my boss wasn't there, and wasn't there to ask that, I had to come up with that myself. So it's okay to ask questions, but it's also about, using questions to help coach people. And I think there's something as well for senior leaders listening, or just, people in management positions, is actually, I think there's something, like you were saying, about that, having that, diverse opinions and all of that sort of stuff, because I know like IGD do the reverse mentoring thing. I think there's some real power in understanding a new perspective from a younger generation or from a different diverse group. And I often say to grads when I'm doing stuff with like grads, people early on in their career, don't forget that some of those people are dinosaurs that have been doing it for that doesn't mean
You're all dinosaurs. How many people
dinosaur.
I annoy on my way to work? It's a very positive podcast.
Well, you know me, the fearless foodie, always a straight talking, but that's the reality. Is like we have to accept. Well, I have to accept, because I'm getting old, that I might not have all the answers, and actually, those newer perspectives are going to help. And I think about people that have just come out. Like I did a nutrition degree. I graduated 25 years ago. All of that is out of date. Like, there's no way I'm using that degree. Like, obviously, I use elements of the degree, but all the nutrition advice is completely different from 25 years ago.
Thinking, what kind of nutrition advice you had?
Well, flipping terrible in hindsight. It's from last century, Beth. It's so out of date. But that's the thing, like actually, getting those different opinions is really great as well.
Yeah. No, diversity of thought is so valuable, and it's not just age, it's different backgrounds and cultures. And we as humans are so individual. We all think so differently. And there's just so much innovation that can come from that by listening to other people, because they'll look at a problem from a completely different perspective and attack it in a different way that you just might not, because that's how their brain work, or because that's from their experiences, or just because of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And if you just think, well, I know all of the answers, or I'm not going to ask for help because I've got this much experience, or or I'm afraid to, you are going to come up against a lot of obstacles. And I think sometimes when you do, as I said, even when you do know the answers, it's good to ask.
Yeah.
I think there can be some really interesting insights that come from that.
So, what do you want people listening to take away from this episode, Beth? What do you think? Come on, sum it all up. You're a journalist. Okay, I'm going to keep throwing that in your face. She's like, don't work with Amy. Like, she gives you a hard time.
I can't even turn it around and say, well, what do you think, Amy? Can I?
Well, you can.
I think it's, don't think you're going to look like a fool by asking a question, because maybe some people will deem it as silly, but most of the time they won't. Most of the time people won't. And I think that, as I said, not everyone can know. We're always learning all the time. And if you ask that question on that occasion, and maybe some people go, didn't you know that? well, I do now, and I'm not going to have to ask it again. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm going to be developing, and I'm probably going to progress much further because I'm going to keep on asking those questions, and I'm going to keep on being curious.
Mm, mm, yeah.
That's what I want people to. Bam.
Boom.
Yeah, it's a journalism.
And I think it's the, you know, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. For me, it's about being, it's okay to be vulnerable and say that you don't always know, you don't have all the answers, and actually to ask those questions. But curiosity, I think curiosity is what leads to innovation. It leads to progress in business. So don't be afraid to ask those questions.
I have a question for you.
Oh, flipping heck.
So it was a discussion that I was having with someone. I can't remember who it was. It'd be funny if it was you on a different day, wouldn't it? And I've just forgotten. Recently at Business Leaders for Food Manufacturer, we were talking about AI and you know, the power of AI and using it. And I was having a chat with someone about AI on a separate occasion quite recently after that. And they said, actually, I think it's going to start making us lazy in some ways. And they were saying to me, you know, even when I'm trying to get somewhere, I use my brain. I try to remember the route. I try not use, you know, something like maps to get there, because I think there's going to be a bit of my brain that gets lost because it's not being trained. And I think that it's interesting, isn't it? With AI, we are using it more to ask questions, and maybe questions that we are embarrassed.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, it's actually quite a good top tip as well. But I do get where you're coming from. There's two sides, isn't there?
Yeah.
We could use it for that. Say like sitting. And actually, I know some people that have said sitting in a meeting and people say acronyms, and then you put it in and ask what it means. But yeah, the other side of it is that we could just lose the ability to have that curiosity.
Yeah. I just think it's a really fascinating topic. I would say for anyone that is using AI to ask questions, to use it in a way where you get the link. So by that I mean, if you ask what does this mean, there will be acronyms for, you know, similar acronyms that will mean something else, and you don't want to say, well, it stands for blah 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 blah, and then you haven't validated your source, and then actually it's completely wrong. But so, you know, AI isn't perfect, and something someone said to me the other day was, AI has got lots of potential, but treat it like a colleague. They don't always get things right.
Yeah.
So don't take it as gospel.
Yeah, totally.
That was a really
I always question if I'm doing something on AI, I might be very specific, like don't make things up. I might say to it, don't make it up, or I ask for the source. Where did you find this from? This doesn't sound true, and it will sometimes go, oh, you're right. I'm like, for God's sake, it's such a people pleaser, AI. So key takeaways for people then are to have that curiosity. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Can't remember what else she said.
Yeah, always maintain curiosity. Don't have a fear. Remember that not everyone is thinking negative things. People think negative things all the time, but even if they do think that's a silly question, well, whatever, you know?
Let them.
Let them, absolutely. Don't think you know everything as well. Use it as a way to empower your team, to spark innovation, and avoid tigers.
And on that note, I think we'll end the episode. So who knew we would get to tigers? We'll put this through AI and it'll come up with a episode title that will be like, how to stop yourself being killed by tigers. Just ask it questions.
You mentioned tigers. I'm a crazy cat lady, for anyone who knows me. So I'm obviously going to latch onto it.
Yeah, totally.
It's your own fault.
Thank you so much, Bethan. And
you're never coming back.
No, you are. If nothing else, you're coming back so that we can all listen to that laugh, because it just brings joy to the day.
Oh, thank you. Maybe to the day, not so much to the ears.
And for everybody listening, you can obviously get in touch with Bethan via LinkedIn, I'm assuming, if you would like to have a chat. But do come and let us know. Send Bethan a message, send me a message. What are the questions that you could be asking that you're not asking that might move things forward a little bit, and go away and give it a go.
Yeah, can we challenge people to ask one question that they're really scared of asking?
Yes. this week, ask one question that you're really scared of. That's your takeaway homework for this week, listeners. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. But in the meantime, be bold, be brave, be fearless. That's a wrap on this episode of The Fearless Foodie. If it hit home, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready for less fluff and more real talk. And if you're ready to build a bolder, braver, more brilliant team, come find me at fearlessfoodies.co.uk. Until next time, be bold, be brave, be fearless.